At the school where my granddaughter attends, something occurred in 2020. The awful truth regarding Marcus Lamb's passing was revealed in Joni Lamb's personal journal. For years, people have only seen the image of a dejected widow. However, the contents of those pages will cause you to reevaluate all of your preconceived notions. Everything you believe to be true about Marcus's final days will be called into question by the startling revelations, unseen tales, and devastating mysteries. You will be shocked by what has been discovered. Prepare yourself to be smacked with the truth like never before. Everyone was shocked when Marcus Lamb unexpectedly passed away in November 2021. As the charismatic leader of the Daystar TV network, Marcus was well known in the Christian media. Seeing his shows every day seemed like having a large fan following to many. Millions of people were moved by his powerful, impassioned voice and appreciated his candidness in discussing politics, religion, and society. For this reason, not only his family but the entire Christian community was taken aback by his death. Marcus only battled COVID-19 for a brief period of time before passing away. It was claimed that virus-related issues were to blame, which made sense given the timing of the pandemic. His opposition to COVID-19 lockdowns, vaccination mandates, and other government regulations had been well known for a long time. He was adamant that people's rights were being violated and disapproved of the way the government was handling the outbreak. To many who followed him, many aspects of his unexpected demise looked depressing. They couldn't accept that he had died because of the virus he had spoken out against so vehemently. We'll now travel to Texas, where a battle with COVID-19 claimed the life of Marcus Lamb, the contentious CEO of a Christian TV station. The conservative televangelist gained notoriety in the last year when his network, Daystar, provided hours of coverage to organizations and individuals opposed to vaccinations and lockdowns. The initial response was one of melancholy. Everyone who knew him, including his followers, wife Joni Lamb, and their kids, was devastated. Marcus was Daystar's public face, thus his abrupt exit left a significant void. His death at the end of his life was viewed by many as a terrible sequence of events. Suddenly the world Marcus had created, the network, the church, the legacy, lost its leader. And others who had followed him for years found it difficult to comprehend. Many people expressed their condolences in the days following Marcus's passing. Many expressed their sympathies to Marcus and shared how his teachings had impacted their lives. From the outside, it appeared to be a straightforward tragedy, the tragic and unexpected conclusion to a well-known life. That Joanie Lamb was at the center of it all makes sense. She said how much she missed her family and thanked people for praying for her throughout talks. She was obviously depressed, and many people sympathized with her. She was catapulted into the spotlight during an agonizing period of mourning after losing her husband. However, as the weeks and days passed, something felt off. Initially, what appeared to be a straightforward catastrophe began to raise more questions than it resolved. Even Daystar staff began to suspect something was amiss, as did family members and those who had worked closely with Marcus. The issue was not that they didn't trust the government. They felt that the details were too complicated. The events leading up to his death seemed rushed. Too much occurred too quickly. The public mourning, the funeral, and the memorial service. The way things appeared to be going unnerved some individuals. As the dust settled, doubtful thoughts started to circulate. Marcus's passing obviously caused a great deal of suffering. However, some began to question if his death was actually an accident or if there was another factor at play. The worries weren't triggered by an outsider. They were from folks who were close to the Lambs. Individuals who had spent several years working with Marcus. These thoughts and stories had no basis in reality. These were those that disagreed with their observations. Something or someone didn't seem to be telling the truth. I was caring for Marcus on my final night with him in the hospital. The time she told me was around 3 a.m. In the dimly lit room, she simply gazed at me. I emailed my mother and said, "I can't do this anymore." I told God, "You feel the pain in my heart." The woman I was serving looked at me and said, "Look what you have done to this family." And that was my last night. I know, my God, you'll get me out of here. My child and I are ruining this family. The following day, he dies. The time frame was one of the main issues. A few days before being brought to the hospital, Marcus appeared to be in good health. He continued to be actively involved in the ministry and to carry out his activities. Many questioned whether there were any health issues behind the scenes that had not been disclosed when he suddenly became ill and passed away so soon. Marcus's illness had lasted longer than anyone had anticipated. Did you miss any signs that something wasn't quite right? These were uncomfortable questions to ask, but they kept coming up. Some began to question whether decisions that no one wanted to discuss were being taken behind closed doors. The situation was further exacerbated by the fact that Marcus had spoken out against the virus that killed him. The man who had voiced such strong opposition to lockdowns and vaccinations, as well as the man who unexpectedly passed away from COVID-19, were difficult for anyone to understand. The humor was too much for some. Was there something else going on, or was it just a tragic accident? Had his opposition to the pandemic affected how he looked after his own health? Was he in greater danger than anyone realized? The narrative shifted from being about mourning to being about doubt in the weeks following his passing. While everyone else was still grieving over the loss, those who had known Marcus for years and had worked with him began to ponder how things had ended out. They couldn't help but feel uneasy, despite their ignorance of what they were witnessing. Marcus's death wasn't the only thing. It was the speed with which things happened. How, before they even began to grieve, people appeared to be leading regular lives. Some felt pressured to step in for Marcus so that the church may continue as if nothing had occurred. Then there was Joni's behavior. Almost immediately after Marcus's passing, she rose to fame by giving interviews and publicly expressing her sadness. She discussed her loss and expressed gratitude to all who assisted her. She appeared resilient in spite of the catastrophe. However, some who were closely observing her felt that her transition from widowhood to life after death seemed to happen too quickly. Initially spoken in whispers, the inquiries were now spoken aloud. Was Joni truly depressed, or was there another factor at play? Her public demeanor did not reflect the profound sadness one would anticipate following such a loss. I went to Daystar in the afternoon to grab something from the cafe. We stopped taking my child to the green room since there was something there and she was with me. She felt afraid. She was at home with a babysitter. But I had to buy something fast this time. When I enter, it is midday. I also assumed that the green room would be empty. It's terrible when I bring her along, too. His wife and feet enter as I proceed to retrieve the food box. They were incredibly afraid for my kid. She collapsed beneath the table, her power gone. I took hold of her tiny body. After I picked her up, I slammed into the car. I also recall discussing it with other family members, some of whom I trusted. It was awful, too. I informed them that I would not be bringing my child here. As the weeks passed, the concerns increased and the hints of uncertainty became open inquiries. Do you think Marcus' passing was merely a tragedy? Or was there another event taking place? The timing, the behavior of his close friends and family, and the seeming speed at which everything happened were all cause for concern. What began as a straightforward, depressing loss captured the attention of everyone. The rapid transformation of Joni Lamb following Marcus Lamb's untimely death shocked many. Immediately, there was much discussion regarding the late Marcus Lamb's wife. In Christian media, Lamb was a huge deal. She remarked about how upset she was when she lost her husband to COVID-19 issues in November 2021, that it was normal for her to be depressed at first. In interviews, she expressed her anguish and thanked everyone who came out to support her. For many years, Marcus was a well-known voice in the televangelist industry, and the Christian community as a whole shared her grief. However, as the weeks passed, Joni's actions appeared to shift in a way that left people intrigued. What was once believed to be grief brought on by a widow gradually evolved into something more intricate. Only a few weeks after her husband Marcus's death, Joni appeared to begin to move on from both the loss and the manner she had been spending her life until then. This wasn't unusual normally. Although everyone handles bereavement differently, Joni's sudden transformation attracted the attention of those closest to her. The Lamb family's close friends, co-workers at Daystar television network, and even those who had long supported them began to realize that Joni was more than just depressed. Many felt uneasy about how quickly she appeared to be moving forward. The primary shift was the strengthening of Joni's bond with counselor Doug Weiss, who had long known the Lamb family. Joni's immediate connection to Doug Weiss didn't make sense. As a Christian psychologist, he had experience working with clients who struggled with addiction, divorce, and spiritual decline. Their collaboration first appeared to be merely a commercial friendship. For some time, Doug had been advising members of the church through Daystar. When Marcus passed away, Joni looked to Doug for support since she knew he could help her cope with her loss. Over the next few weeks, their relationship altered. I responded, "Okay, now I need to talk to Jonathan and Susie. I'm going to do that this morning to get their side of the story after they showed me some emails, texts, and other documents. But I won't travel back and forth any longer. I saw what they showed me. I listened to both sides. When I spoke with Jonathan and Susie, I experienced some spiritual feelings. I did experience certain emotions when I visited Daystar, you know. Today, this interview will be posted. They have the freedom to judge, say whatever they want, and then break it up. I'll give them the freedom to feel whatever they want about it. Following that, I'll make a final film in which I discuss what I saw there. They showed me a few things, and I felt compelled to discuss them with Jonathan and Susie before asking them what they thought. They've already discussed it, so I'm just going to finish the film before letting it go." The gatherings and discussions on loss were initially purely recreational, but they soon became more intimate. Doug was more than simply a friend to Joni. She was eventually spotted attending public events with him after he became her confidant and emotional support system. Many felt that the link was too abruptly altered. 2 months after Marcus's death, Doug filed for divorce from his wife of over 30 years. Many felt that everything was moving too fast, and there was something strange about the timing. Like Joni had experienced a brief period of widowhood prior to her relationship with Doug becoming more intimate. They were so close that there were questions, especially after Joni posted images of them on social media, laughing and cheerful, giving the impression that they were a couple rather than two grieving individuals. The amount of change in Joni and Marcus Lamb was astounding to many who had been watching them for years. Joni had always been Daystar's partner, while Mark had been his public persona. Together, they made the network one of the world's largest Christian media outlets. Marcus's supporting wife, Joni, had always been in the background and helped him appear respectable in public. She was crucial to the network's development, although she always avoided the spotlight in a taciturn manner. Joni rose to fame after Marcus passed away, although initially she was perceived as a widow who still grieved for her husband and wished to pay tribute to him. Now that she had Doug Weiss with her, things were different. The sadness seemed to have transformed into something else. Did Joni truly move on so fast because she was depressed, or was there another reason behind it? The fact that Joni and Doug were dating became evident. Possessing a life of its own. They were attending gatherings together, pretending to be in a relationship, and even sharing intimate moments in public as a result. Now, Joni's growing intimacy with Doug influenced her emotional chats. She expressed her gratitude for his assistance and her need for a confidant. She added that she believed God had placed Doug in her life when she was at her weakest. She described how prayer, suffering, and a common understanding of what it meant to experience such a horrible loss had strengthened their bond. However, this development happened too fast for many who were closely watching. Even Marcus's close friends and relatives who had long been Daystar employees began to feel uneasy. Joni didn't fit the mold of a grieving widow attempting to cope with an abrupt and devastating loss because of how quickly she moved on after her husband passed away. People questioned how much sadness she was still experiencing when someone with a challenging past, like Doug Weiss, was able to accept her right away. The woman who had recently lost her long-term partner and was now perceived as being quite close to someone else was difficult for many to understand. As Joni and Doug became closer, the questioning became progressively more pointed. Did anything else happen behind the scenes? Before Marcus passed away, were Joni and Doug close friends? Did Marcus have a mental connection before to his passing? Did their hasty reunion indicate that they were depressed? Or was there a more elaborate plan? Some believe that Joni's abrupt transformation and Doug's divorce were the culmination of long-brewing events. Jonathan became much more depressed about not getting his way when I married Dayar. You have shown myself, my family, and Daystar such kindness, Doug Weiss. I adore my family, therefore as a mother and grandmother, I can tell you that this saddens me greatly. All of my children are loved. I adore my children and grandchildren. I'm glad we've collaborated for so long. Additionally, I had anticipated that we could have resolved our differences in private. However, Jonathan has now forced me to speak. Everyone is aware that sharing Jesus' love with others is the purpose of our lives. It also tears my heart to watch my son Jonathan and his wife assault. Yes, I would like you to be aware that none of the charges against my late husband and I are accurate. Inside the Daystar network, tensions increased. After years of working with Joni and Marcus, Daystar employees began to notice that decisions were being made more quickly. Joni appeared to be taking more initiative, closing off some viewpoints and making decisions without consulting anyone else. Now that the depressing period was gone, Joni was preparing the network for the future. Was this a depressed woman, or was she taking advantage of the circumstance to gain greater authority? Serious doubts regarding Joni's motivations increased as the whispers inside Daystar intensified and her association with Doug gained more recognition. Some began to believe that Marcus' passing marked the beginning of Daystar's intended leadership transition as well as a watershed in the Lamb family's history. Was Marcus's passing a component of a larger scheme to elevate Joni or even to more fully include Doug into the group? No one knew the complete story, but it became worse. Joni became fairly defensive as suspicions mounted, claiming that her connection with Doug was based only on friendship and support, guided by God's plan. The fact that Doug Weiss was no stranger to turmoil just made matters more challenging. Many were aware that he had previously worked as a counselor, helping people with issues like drug abuse, broken relationships, and other issues. Other aspects of his personal life, including his split, were less obvious. Some people didn't like how rapidly he became engaged in Joni's life, despite the fact that their connection evolved so swiftly. Many people questioned Doug's true intentions because he had been a part of the Daystar universe before being abruptly introduced. It became more difficult to overlook the implications of Joni's actions as the weeks and months passed. Originally formed as a means of consoling one another following Marcus's passing, Joni and Doug's relationship has developed into more. Marcus and Joni had been spotted together for a long time. The fact that Joni moved on so quickly, especially with someone as contentious as Doug, offended a lot of people. The question of whether it was grief or something more serious became the primary issue. Was Joni truly depressed, or was she simply letting life go and taking command in a way that nobody anticipated? The speed at which Joni moved on from her husband's death and the growth of her connection with Doug caused a rift in the Christian community. Some defended her, arguing that Joni had every right to find solace in any way she could because grieving is a personal experience. However, several questioned whether Joni was truly protecting Daystar, her family, and Marcus's reputation. The suspicions persisted, and as Joni's friendship with Doug Weiss grew more apparent, so did the suspicions regarding her motivations. She moved from being a widow to perhaps finding a new spouse in a matter of months. This raised serious concerns about what was happening at Daystar behind the scenes and whether the Lamb family's goal was being negatively altered or truly upheld. It's accurate. It's also obvious that we will never be able to adequately explain what we have endured over the past few years because this has been such a genuinely horrific event for us. It was excruciatingly terrible, I don't even want to describe what that looked like. Yes, it is liberating to not have to depend on a select few and to constantly begging for justice just to have it rejected, like striking a brick wall. I'm happy that the story was shared and that it received positive feedback. It brings happiness and tranquility. When everyone agreed with our parents' feelings, I felt like justice had finally been served. We really wanted to make a short movie. Right now, we don't want to share our entire story. Jonathan and I are taking a brief pause to respond to certain inquiries. Their employment with Daystar Television Network and their faith helped to make the Lamb family strong. However, after Marcus Lamb passed away, everything began to go wrong. His family was initially devastated by his untimely passing because he was a well-known figure in Christian media and the network space. However, as the weeks passed, I started to feel uneasy. Marcus's wife, Joni Lamb, appeared to be moving too quickly. She was naturally depressed, but her family and those close to the Lambs were concerned about how quickly she began dating Doug Weiss. As a wife, Joni had always gone above and beyond for her husband. Together, they built Daystar. However, she rose to fame after Marcus's death, and many soon began to question her actions. A few weeks after Marcus's passing, Joni was observed growing closer to Doug Weiss, a therapist who had spent years working with the Lamb family. Their association initially appeared to be innocuous. Just a work relationship while Joni processed her loss. However, as time passed, it became evident that something was changing. As Joni and Doug spent more time together and attended activities together, it was difficult to overlook how close they were growing. Everything seemed to occur at a strange moment. Doug's separation from his wife of over 30 years occurred just 2 months after his death. Jonathan, Marcus's son, and Susie Lamb, his daughter-in-law, began to express disapproval of the shift. They were always close to Joni and Marcus because they had worked with them in the church for years. But now they found it difficult to comprehend Joni's sudden transformation. They didn't think that was a typical way to grieve. The fact that Joni was moving on so fast and with someone so close to the family seemed improper. They began to question if grief was the true cause of this or if there was another factor at play. The Lamb family, which formerly shared a single objective, was now increasingly dispersed. Jonathan and Susie used to have faith in Joni, but they felt as though they were losing contact with her. They didn't understand how she could move on so fast from Doug, who had been a part of their life for a long time. The situation was exacerbated by more than just Joni's friendship with Doug. It was about faith. Jonathan and Susie saw that the principles upon which their family had founded Daystar were being replaced. Their friendship with Joni was being harmed by her behavior, but the ministry they had all worked so hard to establish was also being harmed. The fact that Joni was assuming more charge of Daystar's direction, making choices without seeking input from others, and excluding particular viewpoints caused anxiety within the network and family. It was evident that Joni, their cherished mother and wife who had always supported them, had changed. As Jonathan and Susie continued to discuss their concerns, it became more obvious that the family was divided. Instead, Joni became protective when they confided in her about their anxieties. They were just friends who had turned to each other for support during a tough time, she said, explaining why she was seeing Doug. Susie and Jonathan didn't believe her when she tried to explain things. They believed they were being excluded and that Joni's new road was more significant than theirs. The more they tried to speak with her, the more isolated they felt. They suddenly found the woman who had been like a mother to them odd. Once a single family, they were now divided.